All right, and we are live. All right, welcome everybody to tonight's call. Thank you guys for tuning in. We've got some good information that we're prepared to share with you guys. Continuing our convention recap. So, what we'll do, like we normally do, is Dana and I will have some notes that we want to express, and then we'll open it up for questions, comments, and we'll end the call with any events that individuals have going on. So tonight's topic that we'll be covering is Adam Green's Success with Essential Oils, It's Worth It. This was a class that he gave at convention. I've watched it numerous times. I love hearing Adam speak.
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorites.
Yeah. Why would you say that's probably one of your favorites?
I just because to me Adam keeps it very simple, but then it's like it's real. Like, let's talk numbers, let's talk statistics. Like, it doesn't make it as much of this elusive illusion. Like it's a lot of hard work, but it's so worth it, and we have to put in the work and the time.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that really strikes me about the way that Adam presents things is, I mean, not only is he a numbers guy, but it's like to hear him speak, it's like really, really encouraging. So hopefully we can convey some of that with you guys tonight and answer any questions that you have. But Dana, you took some really, really good notes. I'm going to allow you to share some things, and then I'll kind of reiterate a little of what I found of value from there.
Okay.
All right.
So he started off, and he was just saying, him being the rank of Royal Crown Diamond, the highest rank in our company. So a Royal Crown Diamond makes about 1.7 million a year, which is 144,551 per month. And he talks a lot about the 4-year career, committing yourself to actually doing the work for 4 years. And the reason he has started with that statistic of like the highest level in our company is because the reality is to make that type of money, most people have to be not just maybe a doctor, but like a surgeon, right? So like the average surgeon makes, I think it was about 2.5 million a year. But for them, they have to go to school about 11 to 16 years before they can even start in the surgery room. So he helps us to appreciate in the beginning, like really the reality is this is a 4-year career, right? That surgeon had to actually put in the work, go to school, develop skills to be able to do and be a professional in his right. And the same with us, like we have to put in the work, we have to, hone in on the skills. For our particular team, we have like Vital 180, so that B2NL, have we gone through all of the training through it? Have we implemented all of those things in order to grow our business? So I thought that was very, very important. Any career paying that amount of money requires education and skills, have clarity as to why you want to do this business.
Yeah, really quickly, I just wanted to chime in on that. When you think about that point of giving yourself 4 years to develop the skills, let's say that even within 4 years, let's say you don't make Royal Crown Diamond, let's say you make gold or platinum. Does that not change your situation and your circumstances enough where you say that that's worth it to take 4 years to develop that? I mean, I know that for a person like me, like I've been through different means of education multiple times throughout my 20s, at least 2 or 3 times. So had I known then what I know now and committed that time to this instead, I probably would be in a very, very different situation or a very different place. And so to me, it just makes sense when you think of like the cost of a person to go to like a university or a college for years, the student loans that they amass, and some don't come out with a career in the field that they even go for. I feel like it's really worth it. I mean, most of us probably work a 9 to 5 anyway. So we're talking about in your spare time, committing 4 years to developing these skills so that the payout on the other end, kind of balances out what you put into it. So I thought that was a really, really good point.
Right. And he has said, like people will start and they'll put 6 months in and they'll be like, oh, well, I'm not where I want to be. And he's like, well, again, it's a 4-year career. Like if it's a career, you have to put in the time and the work. Exactly. You have to put in the work and actually utilize it. So it wouldn't be enough to just be around, but you need to be actively teaching classes or actively promoting. And one thing he had talked, oh no, that's in another section. So then he had talked about why you want to do the business. So he gave a few points on why do a Young Living business. So one was low startup costs, unlimited earning potential. You get to choose your own hours. You choose the people you get to work with. I thought that was kind of funny too, because like sometimes we, go to school, get a certain degree. So I know for me, I went to school to be an esthetician, and then I got to work in these spas and everything was great, but it wasn't always the most favorable people to work with, So you get to choose the people that are in your team or in your network that you work with. So if you go to a job every day and you're like, well, the job is great, but I can't stand the people, you have the opportunity to build something where, again, you can be around people you actually like.
Really quickly, I just want to add to that. And that kind of should instill some sense of confidence. Like there's a reason I know for me, I don't chase everybody. Because when you have the ability to choose who you work with, like I don't want to work with everybody. Like I want to work with people, with certain kinds of people. So that's why usually I'm sifting through and trying to find the people that I want to partner up. And like Dana mentioned, you don't have that freedom typically in your 9-to-5 job. You don't have the freedom to pick and choose who you work with, but in this career you do. So the simple fact that you have that, be selective, allow that to kind of give you that extra confidence boost to be able to go on and do that. So, okay, good night. Our son came to say hello. Okay, so what's the next one?
Travel perks. And so I thought this was kind of fitting, being that Miss Tashina is flying back here, right? So she was at Silver Retreat. They paid for the place she stayed in. They paid to get her there. They paid, for food. Like, what other company does that? So that's pretty awesome too. Travel perks. Be your own boss. You get tax advantages, residual and willable income, which I think is another thing that I don't want to say that I grew up with a poverty mindset, but I don't know that I really understood the value of having willable income or what you're passing on to like your kids and things like that. So that's awesome perk as well. Also, you don't have to have a certain background, no certain certifications or education. You can literally learn as you go, right? All the training that you do, you can do while you're making money.
And from that aspect, one thing I'll add too is sometimes because of that we allow that to intimidate us, where it's like, we're going to learn as we go, but I don't want to make mistakes. I don't want to say the wrong thing to people. I don't want people to look at me a specific way. But in this business, that's part of it. So I think what sticks a little bit more in helping you to develop those skills is having those failures. So it's going to be 4 years of kind of like an awkward phase in your life, right? Because I think one of the things that Adam even talked about for the 4 years that he committed, even though I think he was platinum or almost diamond, like he was going around in circumstances, I guess, where he wasn't the norm. I mean, he is a man in Young Living, especially at that period. There's a lot more men in Young Living now than there was when he was building. But he was in an uncomfortable situation because he was the only man around a room full of women, mothers at that, and he drove this little Honda, or what was the car that he drove?
Yeah.
He drove this tiny car that he had before he even started in Young Living, and people were constantly telling him, like, if you're making this amount of money, if you're doing all these things, why don't you upgrade your car? And the point that he was making was during that period, he was like, I was not concerned with trying to impress other people, nor did I really care as much what they thought about me, because I knew what my end goal was. So I don't know if anybody follows him on Instagram, but the car that he bought a Lotus, which maybe I'm speaking a foreign language to some of the people on the call, but that is a really, really expensive car. I think it's somewhere between 300 to 500,000 for that car. And they only make a certain amount of them per year. I think it's less than 100 they make per year. So the fact that he dealt that 4 years of being uncomfortable and, you know, being maybe unimpressive in the eyes of everybody else, look at what he got on the other side. So, I mean, it's really worth it from that standpoint too.
And kind of just adding on to that, so my next point was to spend more time on how to make it work versus the reasons why it will not. So he had brought out, he was like, you know, some of his limiting beliefs was like, I'm a single young man in an industry of older women, usually with children. So for him, he thought, well, that's why nobody will listen to me. That's why I'm not going to be able to grow with this. So he had just mentioned we might have our own limiting beliefs. We might say, well, the people in my circle don't have money, or, you know, the people in my circle aren't really health conscious, or there might be certain things that it's really our own insecurities that we put on other people, but that could be exactly what our niche is that actually propels us to do better. Because he was saying then later he would go to conventions and they were like, well, of course you're successful. You're a young, attractive young man. Who wouldn't listen to you and want you to come into their home and teach classes or whatnot? So the same thing that he thought was, no, this is why I can't be successful, was the whole reason why he actually was successful. So I thought that was a really cool thing, to be solution oriented. So if you see certain things that, you know, are holding you back, maybe you're a single parent or whatever, those might be just what propels you to encourage other single parents or encourage other people, or however it might look.
And to kind of add to that, I know one thing that I really appreciated from that class was the fact that he talked about sometimes we get stuck up on the how to do something. Like, so I think probably one of the main questions that he gets is, you know, how do you build to this level? How do you do this or that within Young Living? They look at him, you know, as extraordinary, but really one of the things he was saying that it boiled down to is the why. Like, when your why is bigger than, you know, the doubts that you have within yourself or your circumstances, like the how is available everywhere. Like, you can Google how to be successful in network marketing or multi-level marketing, and there's numerous ways and systems that you can latch on and run with. So he was saying the how itself is not nearly as important as the why, because that's what's going to help you to get over those insecurities of feeling like, well, I don't know enough, or feeling like maybe I don't have the right market. And when you're more concerned with the why, you're going to be solution oriented. So I think of like Sarah Harnish, right? And one of the things that she says in her book was that when she moved to New York, was it? I think it was New York. But when she first moved there, she didn't know anybody. But I look at her story, and obviously her why was big enough that she was solution oriented and said, okay, well, let me meet new people. Let me get into new circles. If I feel like my circle is maybe not health conscious or maybe not my target market, how can I get into another market? So when that why is big enough, you're going to find a solution to the problems or the insecurities that you have.
Another example he gave of being solution oriented. So when he first started off, Canada was an NFR. So if people are not familiar with that, so basically, you know, he had to buy the products and then, you know, you sell the products, right? So for him, again, the price of things with his downline and stuff, it would be more expensive for them. So again, he could have looked at that like, oh, we have shipping costs and I have to bring in all of the resources. And he said for a period, he was like, I had like a garage full of books and, you know, tools to give to my team because I knew that they needed these tools. But it was quite an investment for him to do that, investment in time, investment in money. but he knew that that's what his team needed. So again, be solution oriented instead of saying, oh, well, this obstacle is going to keep me from being successful. So the next thing I had was external versus internal motivation. So he had a slide where he had the rabbit with chasing the little carrot versus the rabbit, it was coming from internally. So I thought that was important too, because like he had mentioned, Young Living always is rolling out great incentives for us, like the Help 5. And he was like, we literally like get incentives just for doing what we're supposed to do. You sell a kit, they send you money. Like that's an incentive, right? So, you know, some of those are external incentives, but those external incentives are only going to take you so far. So he was saying like, and then actually I'll give this example. Like, so a lot of people got to silver because they were running for that aroma complete before, right? But then they got stuck at silver. So then what? Because they didn't have any more external incentives, then they got stuck. Whereas if you have the internal incentives, if your why is strong enough, it won't matter how many external incentives are going on around you. You will be motivated and moved to do the required actions. And I like this one thing he said. He said, if you make the money, you can buy the incentives people are running for, right? He's like, I can buy to go on the Alaska cruise. I can buy to go to Hawaii. I can buy, like, if I'm making enough money. So again, have that internal drive and those internal incentives within yourself be strong enough.
And one thing I'll add, because we've talked about this on the call when we were talking about the 4 tendencies and, you know, how we respond to internal and external expectation. So this might, I know that we have a good amount of obligers on the call. If this is something that you struggle with, you know, you have to look internally and say, okay, what is my reason that I'm even involved? Why am I on this call today? Like, why am I involved with Young Living? What am I looking to get out of it? And that has to be a big enough motivator, because we know that that's already probably a tough, it might be a little tougher for you because you typically respond to external motivation as opposed to internal. But taking that time to really understand yourself and how to get past that is really going to be beneficial for you. Because like Dana said, and even in Adam said, you know, I think about that, you know, cruise that's already sold out, and, you know, like Tashina being able to go to Silver Retreat, that's an incentive. You know, some people want, you know, that might be the reason they reach out for silver. But Dana made a very good point. You know, you don't want to be complacent or stuck there. So when you develop that skill of developing internal motivation, it's going to allow you to constantly push forward, even when it may not be easy.
And I will say, even for like being an obliger, so it, sometimes your internal incentive might still be somebody else. So like he had talked about, you know, a lot of the people in his organization started doing the business because their internal incentive was they didn't want to send their kids to a daycare. They didn't want someone else raising their kids and being able to barely make it by. They wanted to be the ones, you know, homeschooling their kids and educating their kids and being with their kids. So for me, you know, my internal drive is like, you know, we have certain things like when we get to silver, we want to go to Bethel. When we get to Disney or gold, we want to go to Disney. Like, so my internal drive really still is me obliging to my kids or my family because that's what's important to me. So it can still be something that, you know, depending on your tendency or personality, I want to help other people. Like, I'm yellow and I'm an obliger. So like, you know, what moves me, motivates me, and incentivizes me is because like, I don't want people to struggle to be able to have wellness in their home. Like, I feel like this should be something that everybody can access. And I know that for some people, the only way that they can do it is if they at least get, you know, maybe a senior star income, or they at least get, you know, enough to be able to pay for their products and things like that. So your incentive can kind of still be, I don't know, relying on other people, but like still come from within, if that makes any sense.
Oh, that's a good suggestion. No, I like that. Go ahead, what do you have?
And I guess I'll say along with that, so he had made a statement that when certain people have the money, then it alleviates some of the other problems. So he had talked about them going to be able to visit his grandmother, I believe it was. He had a whole story about how they got over to Canada and everything like that. But he was like, had I not had the money, like I would not have been able to trace some of our lineage. I would not have been able to spend some of the last days with her because she had passed before his son was born. He was like, so sometimes like we have to remember it's not just about trying to get money or doing things like that, but like when you do have the means, then you are able to do things like that.
It affords opportunity.
Yeah.
And in that example that he gave, I mean, his grandmother wasn't doing very well at all, and it's not like they stayed close, where they could have just driven like a hour or 45 minutes or something like that. And then I think of like most people in their job, like they have typically so many vacation days they can take. So what happens when your vacation days are up and, now you have something that's really important to you personally that you need to take care of? Most people will make the sacrifice and say, okay, well, I still have to go into work because I want to keep my job. So just think about the opportunity that a Young Living business now affords when you kind of have, when you are your own boss and you have your finances in your own hands. Because that example that he gave when his grandmother wasn't doing well, I mean, had, he not been able to go right when they went, then he would have missed out on a precious opportunity. He had a whole video that they recorded of him and Vanessa telling his grandmother that she was pregnant. And that was the last, recording that he had of her being alive. So I just think of that opportunity that's afforded because he's in the position that he is in now.
And then the next thing he talked about, Richard Bliss Brooks, who is the author of The 4-Year Career, has been in multi-level marketing for years. And he had talked about his experience with Gary Young before Young Living was launched and how Gary Young actually approached Richard Bliss Brooks. And Richard Bliss Brooks was basically like, this farmer, you're not going to be successful. Your products are not going to work. Like, this is not going to make it in a multi-level marketing business. You have no business experience. Like, this sounds like an epic fail. Like, no. And obviously, Gary still went ahead, did his business, did what he needed to do. And now Richard Bliss Brooks is actually a diamond in Young Living. Right? So how things kind of circle back around. There might be people close to you that are doubting this as a business, doubting you being able to be successful in it. But the reality is, if your why is strong enough, you're going to figure out the how. Like, stop trying to figure out how it's going to look or how you're going to do it, but have a strong enough why. So then I wrote, Gary knew why he was doing what he was doing, and he didn't have the how. But it became easier and clearer as he moved towards his why.
Yeah. And one thing that Adam mentioned about Gary, I mean, Gary worked his behind off. He was usually the first one there, last one to leave. There's a lot of times where he would forego taking care of himself in efforts of what his end goal was. So you could see his why was very, very large. Like, for anyone who went to convention this year, I think there was one guy, what was his first photographer, or
was his assistant.
His assistant that was with Gary, and Gary would run circles around him and tire him out. And I mean, his assistant was like in his 20s, at the time. So Gary had a big enough why to push him through those difficult times, or to push him to go further than most people would. And so, all in all, remember that when your why is big enough, you're going to be successful regardless. So just keep that in mind. I do think it's interesting that Richard Bliss Brooks is now a diamond within Young Living. And this man, he looked at all the assets that Gary had, and he told him absolutely this would not work. So at that point, even he was not, he was not a believer. He was not on board. But the fact that he came around, I don't know how long it took for him to come around, but he saw the mission, and his why was big enough for him to reach diamond as well. So I mean, the simple fact that you have all of these success stories, why are don't look at it as that could never be me. Look at why is that not me right now? Because eventually it will be. Okay. All right. So we are about a half hour into the call. At this point, let's open up the floor. Does anyone have any questions or anything that they would like to chime in and share? Anything that they may be struggling with that they would maybe like some advice or direction on? Let's include that in there too. Oh, poor Carrie. So Carrie's sick. Oh, okay. Let's see. Believing mindset is huge and why it's so key. Everyone is looking for purpose in life. Solution oriented. Okay. All right. So it looks like we covered most of the stuff in the chat. Does anybody have any questions? All right. If not, let's move on then to events. So let's talk about any events that individuals have going. I know Tuesday at 7 o'clock, we are doing our team event for the Metro Detroit area. The address, I believe, will be posted in the group. If it's not already, it should already be there, but if it's not there, we'll make sure it's there. That one, we're going to be talking about oils for him and her. So I think that's going to be a pretty interesting topic. We're looking forward to that. Any other events that you can think of? Obviously, we have the Live Your Passion rally coming up on October 6th. So if you have not already purchased your ticket and you're in the Metro Detroit area, or you will be, remember to purchase your ticket for that. We'd love to see everybody there, as many as possible. Kind of get our mini convention on. So do have that. What else do you have? Anything?
That's all I have.
Okay. Does anybody have any events that they would like to promote, whether it be online or in person, even for their area? How has this info affected your business in a couple of months since you heard it? Okay. Okay, so no events. Really quickly, I want to go back to a question that Carrie has in the chat. So Carrie's question was, how has this info affected your business in the couple months since you heard it, and how have you implemented it? Oh, that's a good question. All right. So I know for me, when I came back from convention, I was really fired up, not necessarily just from the classes that I took, but from the interactions of talking to people, like the stories they say that are built in the hallways. So one of the things that I know I struggled with before listening to Adam's class and even going to convention is we had a why together as a couple as to why we were doing this business. I know one of our whys was so that I could be home with the kids, so that we can have time to serve in other countries and travel with our family. And that was great and all. I think that why was probably bigger for you than it was for me. And so after listening to Adam's class, like I really had to sit down and come up with my own personal why. And that's something I had never done before. I feel like I'm one of those people that, because I'm a green, I do a lot of research. So I have the how like down pat. I don't mind getting up and speaking in front of people. I don't mind talking to people. But those days when I come in after work, maybe it's been a long work day. Sometimes I work 10 to 12 hours a day. It can be kind of tough. And so for me personally, not having my personal why in place, on those days, I would be like, you know what, I'm tired. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll talk to this person tomorrow. And when you continuously put things off like that, it really does help. It really does stagnate your business. So I know for me, developing my own personal why gave me my own fire. So like to get out and push myself and to make my business fun for me personally, especially when we were able to get spouse accounts, that made it even more. I don't want to say real because it was always real, but it made it even more personal for me. So it kind of lit the fire behind
I'll say for me, being the more solution oriented, because I'm like Chicken Little. Like, it's like the sky is falling with everything. So I have to make sure to check my own like negative thoughts, and it's like, oh, I don't know, my limiting beliefs, and then not putting that on my team too. So like even when he was talking about Canada being like an NFR, and me over here, I'm like, if stuff takes longer than 5 days to ship, I'm like complaining, and I'm like, well, if my team hears me complaining, and I'm having that whole spirit within my team, like what type of leader or what type of example am I showing? So for me, implementing more the being solution oriented, I really liked Marlene when she talked about like, okay, you can stay in that place for 2 minutes, but then we're done with that. Like, right? Like, so let's move on. Like, so for me, that's one big thing that I continue to work on and I struggle with, but I really, that hit me hard, and I'm like, I gotta do better about that.
Yes. Did you sign up as a spouse account right away when it was announced? Oh yeah. I think like the first day or so after we were able to get spouse accounts, I signed up and got my own account. Used that kit as a flip kit, and probably by the end, well, it looks like by the end of the month, I'll at least hit star, and going to push for senior star next month. So
and he's funny because like I was like, oh, like for our account, I'm like, oh, we gotta look at YL Go, and he's like, oh, I already signed up for YL Go. Oh, I'm placing my ER order. I'm like, oh, okay.
yeah. Oh yeah. So I mean, to me, I mean, but that was for me the moment when it became personal to me, you know. And I think sometimes people don't realize how big of a deal that is, you know. And even you mentioned sometimes things that you might say that you kind of inflect on your team, you know, like for each person, their why is going to be different. So the why that you may have, you know, you may talk to them about that and they may not care about that. That may not be important for them. So that's why it's so important that each person develops their own personal reason, their own personal why, because at the end of the day, if they're doing it for the reasons that you tell them to, those hard or tough days or the days where they don't feel like doing anything, they're not going to, or they're not going to press on. And so it's important. Did using you, I'm sorry, so, oh wait, I skipped one, I'm sorry. Did that alter your why or just give you more momentum? Okay, so partially for me, it altered my why, because for us, we've been at executive for a little while now, and I told Dana I'm going to beat her to silver. So it kind of did, like, for me, like, I have a goal of getting my account to gold by convention of next year. So I'm like even trying to pass up all the other silvers on our team.
Yeah, look, it was funny because it's like, oh, when you come to Silver Retreat with me, he's like, when you come to Silver Retreat with me.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So Melissa, if I understand your question, oh, did I sign up under Dana? Yes. So for us, it made more practical sense for me to sign up under her because I know that I'm going to place my ER order every single month, and it's always going to be at 100. So I'm always going to be a qualifying leg. And the money is kind of getting cycled back into the household to a certain extent. So.
And I needed more legs. I wasn't 7 wide that I could build under.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions before we close out the call? Did that answer you guys' questions? Yay. Oh yeah, Silver Retreat is going to be awesome, especially when Dana comes as my +1. All right. Well, it looks like that's all the questions. What we're going to do is go ahead and sign off and close out the call. Thank you, everybody, for being on with us this evening. Hopefully, what we talked about was of some value to you. And if you found value, let us know. We're looking forward to plenty of calls to come. And if there's something that you're struggling with, let us know in the chat as well. We'll put it on the agenda to address in a call going forward. But until then, everybody stay pushing, stay healthy, and we'll see you guys on the next call.
Bye, guys.
Have a good night.